You're on my book. Welcome to my channel, Reading Through the Pages. I'm Samantha. We are here today to do a monthly wrap-up of August because it is already September. Oh Lord. So, I had a very good reading month this past month, which was nice because somehow with the world in quarantine and everything, my brain for a while just took a break and didn't want to, but we're back. I have a list of books and some of them. A lot of my books that I read are library books, and this is part of the reason why I didn't get as much reading earlier this spring and summer. We couldn't go to the library. My library started curbside pickup, and I can now, in fact, go into the library if there are only 3 other people in the library and I'm wearing a mask, and you call ahead, but yay. And most of these books are for my BBC challenge, and I will be doing a video on that. So I will let you know. There are so many for the BBC challenge. I will let you know when a book is not for the BBC challenge. So the first book that I read in the month of August was Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier, and this was a library book. Usually when it comes to books that have had movies made about them, I prefer to read the book before watching the movie. I didn't know that there was a book that the movie with Jude Law and Nicole Kidman was based on. I had watched this film many years ago, absolutely adored it. I describe it as Atonement, but American Civil War instead of Britain World War I. It's based on oral history and actually family stories, so true elements, I suppose. Our 2 main protagonists, Inman and Ada, and Inman goes to fight in the Civil War on the side of the South, and Ada stays home at Cold Mountain. Most of the book is Inman trying to get back to Ada. Our protagonists spend the majority of the book apart. I'm going to say, and this may be just because I watched the movie so long ago. What are you doing? Sheba. More books. Maybe it's because I watched the movie so long ago and loved it so much. I prefer the movie to the book. Very few and far between, so you're welcome. First book. I prefer the movie. The next book that I read was V for Vendetta by Alan Moore, illustrated by David Lloyd, and he did. It's so good. This is actually another book with a movie. Watched the movie first, did not know there was a book. Loved the movie. Hugo Weaving, Natalie Portman, excellent. The premise is basically Britain has succumbed to fascism, and it's a totalitarianism state, and the young woman Evie, who is the main character, meets V, who is bent on revenge. And this is a book that's actually in a form that I don't read that much. It's a comic book. I really enjoyed it. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I had a physical copy. I got this as an ebook from the library, and it was a little bit hard on my computer to read it, and I think you really need a physical copy for that kind of a book, so I was missing that. But otherwise, it was very enjoyable, thought-provoking, very similar to the movie, and also very different from the movie, but I have this one quote from it. Whoever you are isn't as big as the idea of you. And so that's basically the premise of V, is he is anonymous so that the idea of him can be much, much larger than just one person. That was not actually a BBC Challenge book, so we have one. The third book that I read was actually a reread, and that was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon, and I actually listened to the Audible book, so that was read by Davina Porter, and she's just so good. Basic premise for those of you who don't know: a nurse goes back in time from 1945 Scotland to 1743 Scotland. It's time travel, historical, romantic fiction. It's a feel-good book for me. What can I say? And then, of course, they just came out with the new television show, which I have mixed feelings on. But we're not going into that. All right. Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. This is a monster of a book. The actual title in French is Notre Dame de Paris, which is, pardon my French pronunciation, Notre Dame of Paris. Basically, this book is a love story to architecture and the building of cities and the monuments within those cities and what they mean to the populace as a whole. Most of us know this story from the Disney Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I actually did not grow up watching. My mom watched that movie and decided that it was too scary, which I can't say I blamed her because Claude Frollo is probably the worst Disney villain of all time. The book and the movie are very dissimilar. The basic plot points are there, the characters are there, but while the Disney movie focuses on the Hunchback primarily, so Quasimodo and then Esmeralda and Frollo, etc., are all more or less secondary characters. In the book, the main character is the cathedral. It is Notre Dame. Honestly, the secondary character is Paris. So you're looking at a completely different view of character. I once heard that Victor Hugo got paid by the word. It certainly feels that way. He was a serial writer, so basically he wrote for newspapers and it would come out serially, and so he got paid by the page, so basically the same thing. He got paid for quantity. That does not mean that this book is not quality. It does mean it is very wordy. I did enjoy it. It did take me a little while to get through. The next book that I read was Amy and Isabelle by Elizabeth Strout. I think I read a book by her ages ago, and I don't remember. I picked this up not knowing what it would be about, having no context for it, and I wasn't sure I would like it. I really enjoyed this book. It is about a mother-daughter relationship. It's about growing up. It's about sexuality and love and alienation and loneliness. It felt at times very claustrophobic, and that's, I think, purposeful to show specifically how the mother feels her world. Masterfully written. I really thoroughly enjoyed this book. The next book that I read was Blink, The Power of Thinking by Malcolm Gladwell. I actually own this book. Finally. I was given this book by one of my very best friends, Finn, for my birthday 2 years ago, and I finally read it. It did take me a little while to get through, but it's incredibly interesting. So basically, this book, and it's nonfiction, is about the science behind every single decision that we make. Literally that split second of cognition that you are not conscious of, but that informs everything that we do. The introduction is called The Statue That Didn't Look Right, and it's basically opening the book with this premise and explaining how experts in this specific Greek statuary were able to tell immediately upon seeing this specific statue that it wasn't right. And it goes through, it gives real life examples, really, really interesting stuff. Very good book. The next book was actually my first ever Stephen King novel. I read Bag of Bones, and I was actually terrified for this. I do not do well with super thriller-y elements. I'm okay with a little bit, but if it starts getting too scary, not good. I also live in my own house, and, you know, creepy stories at night, no good. This book was not creepy. So it's set in Maine. I think all of his novels are set in Maine. And it's about a writer who is coping with the loss of his wife. He goes from their main house to their second house to work through this and try and get through his massive block with writing, and things start to happen. There's a slight paranormal element, but it's very good. Also, the name of his house is Sarah Laughs, which is... The next book that I read was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I picked up this book because I was watching one of Leena Norm's videos, and she was talking about how much she loved this book. Something in me just said, you have to go read that book. And I thought we had a hard copy somewhere, so ebooks to the rescue. I devoured this book. It was, oh my gosh, it was so good. It's about love and friendships. I really feel like the moral is that you get the love that you think you deserve, and our characters have to work through what they think they deserve and how to get there, and it's so beautiful, and oh my god. It starts with Connell and Marianne in small town Sligo in Ireland and follows them through their last year of high school into college in Dublin. People either seem to love it or hate it. I loved it. It was so good. And it was not a BBC Challenge book, so I read that one just for me. The next book that I read was Girl Interrupted by Susanna Kaysen, and this is a memoir about her time as a teenager in a psychiatric hospital. She went to an appointment with a psychiatrist who she had never seen before, and after this appointment, she found herself in a taxi going to McLean Hospital for the better part of 2 years. And it's her experiences there. It's dry, it's witty, it's heartbreaking, vividly raw and relatable as a teenage girl. So good. And that was a library book. Most of these are library books. I love my library. I'm poor. The next book was City of Bones. It's the first book in the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. And most people know this because of the Shadowhunters television show, which I haven't actually seen, and I've never read the series. Hey, baby. Do you want to eat things? I had never actually read this series before, so I got it from the library. And it's YA, magic, paranormal, fantasy, vampires and werewolves and all sorts of different magic. Basically, the main character, Clare, has to figure out how to save the world. Who doesn't love a strong teenage female character kicking butt and saving the day? For which I will have to read the next books in the series. The next book that I read was actually a ARC that I received last year, and then I moved and it got lost. But it came out in February, and it was Chanel's Riviera by Anne de Courcy, subtitled Glamour, Decadence, and Survival in Peace and War. This was a really interesting book. The back says, a woman who embodied style, a place that defined an era. So it's basically looking at the world through the lens of both the French Riviera and Chanel's circle going into World War II. This was very interesting because Coco Chanel is so incredibly controversial, rampantly anti-Semitic. She collaborated with the Nazis. Very controversial person. The book was very interesting, and actually, while it focused, I can't even say it focused on Chanel. It talked about Chanel and how she was impacted by all of this. Her actions. It talked about Chanel during that time period, but it mostly used her as a lens to focus on a particular group of people, namely upper class artists who mostly lived on the French Riviera prior to the war. Very interesting. Not for everyone. I still have to review this. And Chanel's Riviera was not for the BBC Book Challenge. The next book that I read was Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I loved this book. It's a kid's book, but honestly, C.S. Lewis says something like, paraphrasing, I'm going to say this horribly, if you can't read it at 50, it wasn't worth reading at 10. This is the story of Coraline, who lives in a very old house that has been basically split up into apartments. She goes through a locked door in their dining room one day to find the mirror image of her house on the other side, in which lives her other family. They have button eyes and all sorts of fun little details. Shenanigans ensue, and she has to go on a quest to save her real parents, some friends she makes along the way, and herself from her other mother. This was a quick read, super fun, little bit spooky. My cats are jumping all over everything. Highly recommend Coraline. It's imaginative, it's a little haunting, it's very clever. The next book was Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, which is, of course, a play. Now, I don't do super well reading plays, and I have actually some Shakespeare coming up on my list. I might end up looking those up on YouTube or something and watching the play as opposed to reading it. I know it takes a lot longer, but I definitely feel like I come out of it with more. So maybe I'll see if I can find a version of this online somewhere. That being said, I do understand why it is an American classic. Basically, it's looking at the American dream and disillusionment. I mostly understood this after I looked up a synopsis of it. So, the next book that I read, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, another behemoth of a book, subtitled An Indian History of the American West by D. Brown. Basically, this details the destructive path of white American settlers across America. Oh my gosh. Another American classic for a reason. It's hard to get through. I'm not gonna lie. It's rough. It's worth it. Another library book. The next book that I read was another library book, and that was The Dry, a novel by Jane Harper. This is the first book in the Aaron Falks series, and this is Aaron Falk is a federal agent who goes back to his small hometown in Australia for his high school best friend's funeral, and he ends up investigating what looks like a double homicide suicide by his high school best friend, and it goes back and forth from the past when they were in high school and then the future investigation. I am not usually a big fan of mysteries, especially adult mysteries. This was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I would read more of her. She talks about secrets, small towns with long memories, fear, family, and expectations. And then 2 books that I finished off this month with, which were not BBC Challenge books. These were quick and easy dirty reads from my library on ebook. I found myself just looking for a little bit of mind candy, and these were that. The first one was The Last Single Maverick by Christine Rimmer, and it is I think it's technically a Western romance. Cowboys, family reunion, cheating fiance, a week-long love story, and it's one of the books in the Montana Mavericks series. I have not read any of the others. I assume they're going to be very much like this one. And then Heart of Gold by B.J. Daniels. And this was another Western romance novel. There's some deep-seated guilt, old flames, more cowboys, and a lot of fluff. So those are the 17 books that I read in August. Let me know if you have read any of these, if you have any recommendations going forward. I will have a video on the BBC Challenge going up soon. hopefully. I have some arcs to review, so we'll see what we get to there. This week, what will I be reading? I just finished Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. I am about to finish Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. Very interesting book. And then I got myself a present, you guys. I am a big lover of a physical book. However, I also read a lot of ebooks. And especially during this whole lockdown situation, I was getting super tired of trying to do that on my teeny phone or my big bulky laptop. So I got myself, guys, a Kindle Oasis. This one's a 9th generation, refurbished, so I was slightly restrained. But I mean, look at the cover, it's so pretty. So I now have a Kindle and I'm already reading on it, and I'm reading Homegoing. Very excited. Such a good book. But yeah, my new present for myself. So I have 1 more book done, 2 more in the works, and TBR coming up.